Good evening to everyone. Today my topic is dividend policy. We all know that the company issue the dividend to the shareholders. The people are the public one who invest the money in the shares of different companies. Mainly they invest the money to get some return from the companies. At the end of each and every year, the company earns a profit. The profit is distributed as a dividend to the shareholders. From the point of view of shareholders, we call this one as the rate of return expected by the investors from their investment. That is a dividend. Dividend is usually issued by the company from their profit to the shareholders according to their proportion. There are different types, two types of dividend policies are there. One is Walter's approach, that is a theory of relevance and theory of irrelevance. And theory of relevance, we have two approaches. One is Walter's approach, another one is Gordon's approach. Here, I'm going to explain about the Walter's approach model of dividend policy. See, the Walter's approach mainly explains the relationship between the firm's rate of return and its cost of capital. Firm's rate of return, nothing but the return earned by the company. The profit is earned by the company from the project, That is the rate of return. And its cost of capital is nothing but the dividend or interest is paid to the shareholders and the debenture holders respectively. Cost of capital. Capital means we are raising the capital through equity, preference, and debenture. Why we call it as cost means the expenses incurred for raising those capital. Here the expense of, for example, if we are raising the capital through preference shares means we have to pay 8% or 5% as a dividend to the preference shareholders. So that 8% or 5% is nothing but the cost, the expenses incurred for raising the capital. Likewise, if we are raising the capital through debenture, we have to pay 5% or 7% as a debenture interest to the debenture holders. That is the expenses or the cost incurred for raising the capital through debenture. So here the Walter's approach clearly explains the relationship between the rate of return and its cost of capital. There are three things are there. If R is greater than K, here R is nothing but rate of return. If the rate of return is greater than K, that means the return earned by the company, the rate of return earned by the company is more than the cost of capital. For example, if you're earning 100 rupees and the cost of capital is 50 rupees means, so we have 50 rupees in our hand as a retained earnings. So the rate of return is 100 and the cost of capital is 50 means we pay 50 rupees as a cost of capital. Remaining 50 rupees is retained by the company. Then the company is said to be growth firm. Suppose if the rate of return is, if you earned only 25 rupees as a rate of return and the cost of capital is constant, for example, 50 rupees. But here we earn only 25 rupees as a return, but we have to pay 50 rupees as a cost of capital. So we are in a deficit of 25 rupees. So the rate of return is less than the cost of capital means then we have to distribute the entire 25 rupees as the dividend to all the shareholders, and we have to borrow the extra 25 rupees from the outsiders to distribute this 25 rupees as dividend to the shareholders as well as interest to the debenture holders. Then we call it as a decline firm. Suppose if the company earns a rate of return as 50 and the cost of capital is also 50 means the company paid the entire 50 rupees as a dividend to all the shareholders, then nothing is available in the hands of the company. So we call this one as a normal firm or we call it as a break-even point. So the company must earn the minimum return to distribute the dividend to the shareholders. The company earns more than that is called a break-even point. The company earns more than the cost of capital. The rate of return is more than the cost of capital means the remaining amount is enjoyed by the company or retained by the company. That is called retained earnings. Otherwise, we call it as a margin of safety. Suppose if the company, whatever the company earned, that entire amount is distributed as a dividend to the shareholders means we are in a dangerous stage. That is, we are in the break-even point, but we can't sustain in this stage for a long period of time. We have to earn more rate of return to meet out the cost of capital as well as the excess amount will be utilized by the company further to meet out the contingency position in the future as well as for the expansion, modernization, and for R&D. We have to utilize the amount in the forthcoming periods. Okay. See, here one problem is taken. The following information is available in respect of a firm. Capitalization rate is 10% and the earning per share is rupees 50. Assumed rate of return on investment. The rate of return, suppose if the rate of return is 12%, what is EPS? Suppose if the rate of return is 8%, what is EPS? Suppose if what is the price of the share? Suppose if the rate of return is 10%, what is the price of the share? show the effect of dividend policy on market price of the shares. Now we are going to calculate the market price of the shares when the rate of return is 12, 8, and 10%. By applying the Walters formula, when dividend payout ratio is 0%, 40%, and 100%. Suppose you are earning the rate of return as 12% and the dividend payout ratio is 0. Dividend payout ratio 0 means the company is no need to pay any dividend to the shareholders. The entire 12% return is enjoyed by the company and it is retained by the company. In such situation, what is the market price of the shares? Now we are going to calculate the market price of the share here. P equal to, here the dividend is calculated on EPS, 50 into the dividend payout ratio is 0. So the 50 into 0 by 100, no? Oh, here dividend payout ratio is 0. So 0 plus, and the rate of return is 12%. 12 by 100, 0.12. 12. Earning per share is 50 minus the dividend payout ratio is again 0. Divided by KE. KE, that is, KE is 10%. Capitalization, equity capitalization rate is 10%. 0.10. The overall capitalization rate is divided by 0.10. Here, price of the share equal to dividend. Dividend is 0 and the dividend payout ratio is 0 and then plus, plus, and the rate of return is 12%, 0.12. Within the bracket, the earning per share is rupees 50 and the dividend payout ratio is again 0 divided by KE. Divided by 0.10 and the overall divided by is 0.10. So the price of the share equal to 0 plus 1.20 rupees 600. Okay. Now, when the here the rate of return is just 8%, now we are going to calculate the market price per share. Same price of the share equal to price of the share equal to, and the dividend payout ratio is 0 plus RS 8%, 0.08. And the earning per share is 50 minus, and the dividend payout ratio is 0 divided by KE. KE is cost of equity is 0.10. And the overall division is divided by so the market price of the share is rupees 400. Here in the same way, here the rate of return is 10%. Price of the share equal to 0 divided by 0.10 plus, and then the earning per share. P plus R, E minus D, D plus R. Okay. Here D is dividend payout ratio is 0 plus, and then R. R is written 0.10 into E, that is 50 minus dividend payout ratio 0 divided by point, the rate of return, the overall division 0.10. So the price per share equal to rupees 500. So the dividend payout ratio is 40. Suppose if the dividend payout ratio is 40, the price of the share equal to and the dividend payout ratio is 40%. So EPS 50 into 40%, it is rupees 20 divided by 0.10. Okay. Plus the dividend payout ratio divided by, or here the rate of return is here the rate of return is 0.12, 12% into E is 50 rupees minus again the return 20 divided by 0.10. So the earning per share equal to rupees 560. Here the dividend payout ratio is same 40%. Here the P equal to same 20 rupees plus 0.8. Here the dividend pay 0.08 divided by into E minus, okay, 50 minus EPS is 20 divided by 0.10 and the overall divided by 0.10. So the price of the share equal to rupees 440. Here the price, we have to calculate in the same way. The price of the share is rupees 500. Here when the dividend payout ratio is, when the rate of return is 12%, 8% and 10%. When the dividend payout ratio is 0% and 40%. One more is 100%. Here we are going to calculate. When the dividend payout ratio is 100, the price of the share will be, we have to calculate in the same way, the price of the share will be rupees 500. Here the price of the share will be same rupees 500. Here the price of the share will be the same rupees 500. See, again I will calculate it here. Price of the share equal to dividend plus rate of return into earning per share minus dividend divided by KE and divided by overall KE. So here the dividend payout ratio is 0 plus the rate of return is 12%, that is 12 by 100.10 into earning per share is 50 minus dividend payout ratio is again 0 divided by KE. KE is the cost of capitalization rate 0.10 and the overall division is 0.10. Overall divided by KE. So the price per share is rupees 600. See, when the dividend payout ratio is 0%, and the market price of the share is 600 because we enjoy entire rate of return in the company, the price of the share get increased. When the dividend payout ratio is increased from 0 to 40%, the market price of the share gradually decreased to 560. In the same way, when the dividend payout ratio is increased from 40% to 100%, the price per share, price of the share in the market is rupees 500. Again, it is reduced. Here, when the dividend, here the rate of return is 12%. See, already explained about 3 cases. Suppose here the rate of return, here see, here the R is 12% and the cost of capital. And the cost of capital is, capitalization rate is 10%. Here the cost of capital is 10. So the rate of return is greater than cost of capital. So we call it as, it is a growth firm. So the rate of return is 12% and we are paid 10% as a cost of equity. So we have 2% as a retained earnings in our hand. So we call this one as a growth form. Here, the rate of return is 8%, but the cost of capital is 10%. So here the rate of return is 8%. We just earn 8%, but we have to pay 10% as the cost of capital. So we have to borrow 2% from outsiders and we distribute this one as a dividend to shareholders and interest to the debenture holders. So we are in the declining conditions. Here the rate of return is 10% and the cost of capital is also same 10%. So whatever we earn, we just distribute as a dividend to the shareholders. So we call this one as a normal form. So here the rate of return, first one is 12%, which is greater than K. The company should retain the profit of ₹2 when R equal to 12% and KE equal to 10%. So the company retain 2% as a return and the remaining 10% as distributed as a dividend to the shareholders. So the first one, we call this one as a growth form. Second one, R is 8% and the dividend payout ratio is 10%. Here, R is less than 10%. So we borrow 2% from outsiders and we distribute this one as a dividend to the shareholders. Otherwise, this arrears of dividend will be carried forward to the subsequent year. So we call this one as a declining form. Here the R is 10% and the K is also 10%. So R is equal to K. So whatever the company earns a dividend is just distribute the entire amount as a dividend to the shareholders. So this dividend payout ratio does not affect the price of the shares. Thank you, students.